As Russia's war against Ukraine approaches its one-year anniversary, Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, has been the center of attention. His comments, such as, "I need ammunition, not a ride," or "Russians will see our faces, not our backs," have propelled the popularity of this wartime leader in Ukraine, but also in the whole world. So, who is Volodymyr Zelensky? Volodymyr Alexandrovich Zelensky was born on January 25, 1978, in Kryvyi Rih, in the Ukrainian Socialist Republic. Zelensky came from an educated Jewish family. His father was a professor and computer scientist, while his mother was an engineer. Sadly for the Zelenskys, their family suffered harshly during World War II and the Holocaust, with many family members being murdered in cold blood by the German invaders. Zelensky's grandfather, Semyon, had his 3 brothers and his father massacred after their house was burned down. Later in the war, Semyon, an infantryman in the Red Army, participated in the Battle of Berlin and reached the rank of colonel. Interestingly, although Zelensky was born in Ukraine, he spent 4 years of his early childhood in the Mongolian city of Erdenet, where his father worked. He first learned Russian and only learned Ukrainian later in his life. In 1994, Zelensky, then a 16-year-old adolescent, got an offer to study in Israel, but his father didn't allow him to go, and instead, Zelensky completed a law degree in his hometown of Kryvyi Rih. He ended up never practicing law, but instead chose to take the path of acting. At the age of 17, the young man started his career by joining his local team competing in comedy competition KVN, a Russian comedy competition which allowed international teams to compete. His talents were quickly noticed, and the young man was drafted into a more prominent Ukrainian team. His effort paid off, and in 1997, he won the competition. It's important to note that this competition is no joke, and that its viewership regularly surpasses the 5 million mark. After winning, Zelensky decided to continue with his career, but to take a different path. He created Kvartal 95, a comedy team that toured multiple post-Soviet countries and participated in numerous comedy competitions between 1998 and 2003. The obvious next step for Zelensky's career was film creation, and that's exactly what he did in 2003 when he signed a deal to produce TV shows for the Ukrainian TV channel 1+1. Zelensky was quickly becoming a star in Ukraine, Russia, and many other post-Soviet countries. He mainly spoke in Russian and could therefore reach a vast audience in many of those nations. In 2008, he starred in his first film, Love in the Big City. After this successful endeavor, Zelensky proceeded to play in a multitude of other comedy films as the lead actor, including the dubbing of both Paddington Bear movies. During his weekly comedy shows, Zelensky continually criticized officials for their incompetence and corruption, but he would also make some more inappropriate jokes that would later be used against him. When the Maidan Revolution started in 2013, Zelensky supported the protests, but did not get himself directly involved with them. At first, Zelensky was quite hesitant at cutting ties with Russia, since he himself had a long history of working there, and at this point of his career, he arguably had more fans in Russia than in Ukraine. Nevertheless, in 2014, following the annexation of Crimea by Russia, Zelensky staunchly became pro-Western and started gradually breaking his ties with Russia. Zelensky's company, Kvartal 95, also made substantial donations to the Ukrainian army, which caused many Russian politicians to petition to disallow Zelensky's shows to air in Russia. Ironically, in 2014, when Ukraine spoke out about its intentions of banning Russian artists from performing in the country, Zelensky strongly opposed it, and when the law ended up passing the next year, several Russian-produced films in which Zelensky acted were banned in Ukraine. Zelensky regularly criticized the pro-Western Poroshenko government for its inability to end the conflict in the east of the country and its slow fight against corruption in the country. In 2015, Zelensky cemented his popularity in Ukraine by becoming a star in his television series, Servant of the People. Ironically, the show is about a teacher, fed up with corruption, becoming president of Ukraine after a video of him criticizing the government gets leaked by one of his students. The show is on Netflix and YouTube. I recommend anyone interested to take a look. The link will be in the description of this video.
Что в Октябрьском районе, что в Шевченковском. А кто в этом виноват? Вы и вы. Я и моя фракция, мы работаем про вашу фракцию. Не припинить, будь ласка. Мы делаем все для страны. Ты мне скажи, почему вы голосовали за Германию?
After the huge success of this series, Zelensky decided to run for presidency, with his main promises being fighting corruption in Ukraine and the resolution of the armed conflict in the east of the country that has been raging there since 2014 and has by then displaced millions and cost thousands of people their lives. Zelensky's main competition was Poroshenko, a very pro-Western Ukrainian businessman who had been ruling the country since his election in 2014. Zelensky, also pro-Western, but to a lesser extent, and seeked to be more accommodating to the country's Russian minority. Zelensky's and Poroshenko's rivalry heated as the 2019 Ukrainian election grew closer, with Zelensky regularly criticizing Poroshenko for being an oligarch and even threatening Poroshenko with jail time for claims the Ukrainian court later claimed unfounded. On the other hand, Poroshenko claimed that Zelensky was closely affiliated to Russia via his business partners. Zelensky ended up winning the second round of voting with over 74% of the votes, after also coming in first place in the first voting round with just over 30% of the votes. Among many things, Zelensky promised to cut taxes for big businesses in order to attract them to Ukraine, removing parliamentary legal immunity and clearing Ukraine's courts from corrupt judges and officials. Zelensky was able to achieve some of his promises in the first year of being elected, but encountered a lot of difficulties going forward, and as a result, his popularity rapidly started decreasing, at one point reaching the low 20% range. Among interesting reforms that Zelensky enacted during his presidency was the cancellation of the military parade normally held on Ukraine's Independence Day. Instead, Zelensky promised to spend the money allocated to it on veterans. Zelensky was also heavily criticized for his secret trip to Oman in January of 2020, which was not published on his official schedule and appeared to be a mix of personal holiday and government business. The president's office was quick to point out that the trip was paid for by Zelensky himself, but this didn't help him much and was unfavorably compared to a secret vacation his predecessor Petro Poroshenko took in the Maldives, and which Zelensky himself had criticized at the time. Nevertheless, progress did really happen, and Ukraine saw gradual reforms aiming at decreasing corruption and oligarchs' influence in the country. The president also tried resolving the conflict in the east of the country peacefully, and even held phone conversations with Putin on the matter. Unfortunately, the attempts at peace failed, and as we all know it, the conflict continued. Among other events during his presidency, the Trump-Ukraine scandal is a hard one to miss. In the months preceding the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine, Zelensky often criticized Western media for saying a full-blown war was imminent, but that backfired when Russia actually invaded on the 24th of February. Zelensky's official reason for denying the imminence of the war was his belief that it would cause chaos and mass exodus in Ukraine. Nonetheless, on the eve of the invasion, Zelensky published an inspiring speech aimed at the Russian people, to convince them to stand up to Putin and the invasion. Sadly, it was to no avail. Zelensky quickly became the face of the Ukrainian resistance and was able to, thanks to his entertainment career, but also thanks to his courage, rapidly win over the support of the people of Ukraine and abroad, with his approval sharply rising above 90%. Many smear campaigns aimed at discrediting him soon appeared after the invasion. Just to name a few, It was widely shared on pro-Russian channels that Zelensky had left the capital, but in response to this, Zelensky published a video of him and his team in central Kiev. Further, a fake video of him taking lines of cocaine was also shared, with many Putin supporters still believing it to be true. And lastly, a news article circulated online claiming Zelensky had a net worth of over $1 billion. But this was again proven false, and merely a smear campaign designed at decreasing his popularity abroad. In reality, although Zelensky is quite a well-off man, his net worth is approximately $20 million, which he earned due to his very successful acting career and his show Kvartal 95. I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to see more similar videos.